All right, what's going on YouTube? So today we are going to be setting up and importing maps into SkaterXL using Hondune's SkaterXL map importer. Pretty much everything I'm doing is going to be following along with this guide here, so I highly recommend that you have this open um, while you go through this tutorial, because we're pretty much going to be going through it step by step. There's a few things I won't cover, so like I said, make sure that you have this open and you get a few things done first. The first of which is making sure that you have your Unity project set up using the high definition render pipeline, because that is required for SkaterXL. That is what the game uses. So in order for your map to appear correctly in the game, you need to be using HDRP as well. So just follow this tutorial here. I'll have a link to that in the description. And then there's a few other things like creating asset bundles, stuff like that. I'll go through that a little bit later on. But the first thing we're going to want to do is actually make our map, right? Assuming you don't have a map already. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up Blender and we're going to create something tremendously simple, just as a way to show you guys how this works. So this is not a tutorial on how to use Blender. This is not a tutorial on how to make maps. This is just showing you the process of actually making something and putting it in the game. So here we go. We have our plane, and we're going to throw a grindable surface on here as well. So we just want a cube. We'll make it a little shorter, and we'll make it a little skinnier, much skinnier, and we'll make it longer. About there. And there. How's that? There's our beautiful, beautiful test map that we're now going to put into the game. So we can just go up here and we'll export it as an OBJ. You can also use FBX or any other 3D file format as far as I know, but OBJ and FBX are the two that you're going to want to use. And we're just going to call this tutorial. If I could spell tutorial. Tutorial.obj. Just save that in my documents. And export. So now we're going to go back into Unity, which I already have open. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to go into our assets folder. And we need to make a new folder. And we're going to name that folder editor. Just like that. Then we'll go in here, right click, create, and go all the way up here. We're going to do a C# script, and it's going to be called create asset bundles. That is case sensitive, so capital B, capital A, capital C, no spaces. Create asset bundles, and just click somewhere, let it create. And then what you got to do is you show an explorer. It should open over here, and then you can just open it with anything that will allow you to edit code. So Notepad works just fine. Delete what's in there, and then go back to your tutorial here, the Hondune document, and he has this code listed right here. So we're just going to copy all of this, Control C, go back to Notepad, paste it all in there, hit save, and close. That is done. So now that asset bundle creation is set. We are good. Now the next thing that we want to do is, well, get rid of the main camera, because that will interfere with our game camera. Directional light can stay. That's fine. So we want to put our park in here, right? So let's import a new asset and just go to wherever you saved your asset. So this was tutorial.obj, and we'll import it in. And then we can just drag it into our scene, and there we go. There is our map. I didn't check the scaling or anything like that at all, so yeah, no clue how big it's going to be, but we will see once we actually get it into the game, won't we? So now that we have it in the game, everything looks a little gray, doesn't it? So we need to create some scene settings. So let's right click in the hierarchy, head down to rendering and scene settings. And that's pretty much it, honestly. Everything is pretty much set as it needs to be. If there's anything that you want to change, be my guest. You can dig through and learn it. I am honestly a scrub with all this stuff. So basically, if I can do it, you can do it. Because I'm a straight up newbie with this stuff. But I was able to figure this out pretty quickly. As far as like texturing and all that kind of thing, that's way over my head. But as far as this process goes, I know this process. So now that we have our scene settings in, we need a place for our skater to actually start, don't we? Well, actually, before we do any of that, the first thing that we need is collision. Now, depending on how you made your model, you might be able to just throw a mesh collider on it, which, let me move my camera. If you click on it and go over here in the inspector to add component, scroll down to physics, you might be able to just throw a mesh collider on it. And if you click over here with mesh, you should have one. But mesh colliders are iffy in SkaterXL. Sometimes the board will get stuck in the collider, which can be very annoying. So I'm going to show you guys how to do it with box colliders, which is the way that I do it and also works far more reliably. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this cube up here and we're going to go into orthographic mode. And we're going to line ourselves up. Now, of course, I made the mistake of not using a cube for the floor. I used a plane for the floor, so I will literally be unable to see it, but that is okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click here, and we're going to create an empty on our object. And we're just going to right-click, rename it. We're going to call it floor. And then head over here to the inspector, add component, physics, and box collider. Now this will line it up right here, right in the middle of our scene, so we can just align it ourselves and place it as necessary. Now this is where I fucked up because I don't have any way to tell where the plane actually begins. So I have to do a little bit of guesswork here in terms of the depth. But as far as the rest of the object goes, I can just go above it, hit Edit Collider, and we'll just extend it all the way out, like so. There we go. That looks good. It's a tiny bit above it, so we can just lower it a teeny bit. And that should be good. So now that is our floor. Our floor now has collision. So now we can do literally the exact same thing. Just right click on our object, create empty. And once again, we'll rename this and we'll call this box. And add component, physics, box collider. And I'm going to immediately edit the collider and just make it the width of our ledge, the length of our ledge, and then I'll have to go to the side. Yep. And once again, just make sure that it is fit nice and snug around your object, because you want the collision to be exclusive to the object, right? You don't want any funkiness going on here. There we go. That looks good. So now that our box has collision, we need it to actually grind, right? That's pretty important with these sort of things. And thankfully with Hondune's map importer, everything is remarkably easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click in the hierarchy, not on anything, just create a separate, entity, create empty, rename it, and we're going to call this grinds. It has to be named that way, capital G, grinds. Now right click on that, and we're going to assume this box is concrete, right? So we will rename this, and again, this is case sensitive. Everything has to be exactly the same. It mentions this in the tutorial as well. Grind, spline, concrete. One word, capital G, capital S, capital C. Now this game object just needs to get placed anywhere near your box or rail or grindable surface or whatever it is, anywhere near it. And now you're going to be creating 2 points off of that. So we right click on that grind spline, create empty, and you don't even have to name those. Don't even have to worry about it. And send it to one edge. And then you can just copy and paste that, and we'll drag it to the other one. And I haven't made sure that they're actually lined up on the object, so let's now move that over and move that over. And we should be good. Now the only thing that we haven't added yet, which we should have done first, is our spawn point. We need a place for our dude to actually start, don't we? That is pretty important. So what do? You create an empty, and you rename it spawn point. Now, wherever this game object is, that is where you will spawn. So let's place this in our scene here. Now, wherever the blue axis is facing, this blue arrow here, that is where you will be facing when you spawn in, so keep that in mind. But that looks good. That looks good. We'll spawn right there. Works for me. Now, what we need to do, because we're pretty much done at this point, right? As far as, this is a map. This is a map that is ready for the game. So, what do? Well, we go to our scene over here and we click on it. And now I'm blocking it. But over here where it says asset labels, down here asset bundles, it says none. We need an asset bundle. So what you do is you just click on it and you can click new, and it's going to ask you for a name. Again, I'm just going to call this tutorial park. And that's it. Hit enter, and you've now created your asset bundle. So now how do we get the actual map? Click on our scene over here, and you remember that script we created earlier? You're going to right click on tutorial, and you just click build asset bundles. So let's click that. And we let Unity do its thing. This always, this will take a varying amount of time depending on, one, your computer, and two, how complex your park is, because you're building the park at this point. So if you have a lot of complex lights and shaders and objects and, rigid bodies and all kinds of shit, then yeah, it's gonna take a little bit longer. So we'll just let it do its thing right now as it finishes up. And now here we have our asset bundles folder. Now there's a few things in here, but all that matters is this file right here. So you can right click on it, show in Explorer, and you can see here that there's all kinds of other stuff here, but the only one that matters is just called file. It's tutorial park, 124 kilobytes. This is your map. So to get this in the game now, just right click on it, copy it, head over to your documents file or documents folder, head to your SkaterXL folder and your maps folder, which is where this is where all your created parks go. If you've already set up the importer, this is not new. You already know where these are. If you haven't yet, for the importer, you have to make a folder in your documents folder called SkaterXL. and then another folder in there called maps, and that is where all your custom maps will go. So now we have our tutorial park. We can just paste it in here, and that's it. The map is now in the game. So we can head over to Steam here, pop the game open. And here it is, Tutorial Park. Click on that to load in. And look at that, ladies and gentlemen. We have a skate park. What could be loosely described as a skate park in SkaterXL. It is that simple and shockingly easy, honestly. So hope you guys learned something. Hope you make some dope maps. And I'm looking forward to seeing what people make. Big thanks to Hondune for creating this and making the process exponentially easier for people like myself who have never really made maps before but would love to get into it, because this is awesome. So like I said, hope you learned something. Have fun. Make cool stuff. Keep skating. Peace.